Hi everyone! A few weeks back I made a video about some of my favorite picture books from my favorite illustrators, and today I wanted to share with you some books that I think every illustrator should have and read. And they are filled with information about pricing, licensing, contracts, and as always I will leave all the links to them below. So let's start with the first one. This is actually one of the first books I got when I became an illustrator. It's one of the publications by the AOI, the Association of Illustrators. And if you know my channel, you know that I always recommend joining them because they are always very helpful. The book is called The Illustrator's Guide to Law and Business Practice, so it sounds very serious, but the book is really nicely and accessible, written by Simon Stern. So even on this spread, one of the first one in the book, you can see that there are lots of helpful information already included. Licensing, taking into consideration if the use of your work will be international, global, national, fees for reusing your artwork again, agent's fee, extra payment for a rush job, all the different branches of illustration industry, book covers, usage, territory, so all this information you will find in here. So I marked some pages that I wanted to show you. And the first one is writing a license. This is an extremely important one because I'm noticing that even some illustrators working in the industry, they still don't know that they should license the work. And you will probably, at some point when working in the illustration industry, have to educate your clients about that. So it's really important that you yourself know as much as you can about the subject. And you can see here very brief examples of different licenses. So for example, here is an example for magazine illustration license, for a brochure, for a greeting card, for a book jacket, because those are all very different branches of the industry. And so they will all demand different types of license. So next thing I wanted to show you are fees. So you've got the whole chapter, very brief one, but very easily written about different fees. And it's once again divided into different categories of the illustration business because each of them will demand a different fee. If you are also looking for more precise information about pricing your illustration work, I also made a video about that, and I will leave the link to it above and below in the description box. The author of this book has been an illustrator working in the industry for over 30 years, so this book covers also things like contracts. You've got the whole chapter about agents. I'm receiving a lot of questions and messages from you asking about agents, so it's very nicely written here how it works. And at the end of this book, you will also find some advice what to do if you will find yourself in more extreme situation, like resolving a legal dispute. So that's it. I really recommend you this book, especially if you are a beginning illustrator. It's very accessibly written, it's very easy to read, and I think you will learn a lot. So the next book I wanted to show you is this one. It was also one of the first one I got when I started out as an illustrator, and I got it after a recommendation from Holly Exley. It's called Becoming a Successful Illustrator. That's the second edition that I have, and it was written by Derek Brazil and Joe Davis. You can also find a beautiful illustration by Holly Exley right here at the beginning. And what this book does is to lead you very nicely from the very beginning of the illustration, so explaining to you what the illustration industry is about, and finishing with some contracts and some agreements. So it goes from a very general overview of what illustration business is about, and it ends with a bunch of very practical and good advice and information for illustrators. It also features a lot of different illustrations, and for example, a very nice part about being professional as an illustrator. This is not something that is very common to find in this kind of books. Next thing, for example, I wanted to show you is different ways that you can self-promote yourself and your art. This is also a question that appears a lot when you leave me comments. So, for example, here you've got ideas about portfolio websites, newsletters, social networking, and so on. And the last part I wanted to show you, this is actually very nice because at the end of the book you've got activity spreads. And I know that when you start working as an illustrator, it's very hard to find your niche, to decide what you want to focus on. So here, for example, by checking the fields that you feel good at, the book will help you to figure out what would be a good branch of the industry for you to work on. So, for example, also at the end, you've got examples of creating an email newsletter, and activity about understanding fees. So a lot of very nice and practical information. So again, I'm going to leave all the links to the books below. This one I think is great for beginning illustrators. So the next one is this one. This is the biggest and the newest book in my collection. It's really heavy. And it's the Graphic Artist Guild Handbook, Pricing and Ethical Guidelines. So this book, as you can see, it's mostly dedicated to graphic artists and graphic designers. But also, if you want, you can find a lot of general useful information. What is great about this book for illustrators is that you've got the whole chapter dedicated to illustration fees and prices. And you can see here in the index note that all the illustration branches are divided, because a very important thing to know is that if you make an illustration and you make it for a magazine and you make it for packaging, even if it takes you the same amount of hours and time and effort to complete it, you should price it completely differently, because packaging is generally much more expensive than editorial illustration. And those are some basic information that every illustrator should know. Probably also you will have to inform your clients about it, because it often happens that smaller clients don't know about illustration prices and licensing, so it's very important for you to know it. So I will show you a little bit about it. You've got a general note about pricing, and then you start with division in illustration industry branches. So you've got advertising with its different price, and you've got a whole charts of examples of prices, how color and black and white illustration for advertising should be priced. Of course, it's all very, it's just an example, and you can see that you've got quite big brackets for price fees. But even so, this is a very good guidelines for you to know that you shouldn't charge under that. And in my personal opinion, it doesn't matter in which part of the world you live in, but when working with international clients, you should never go below those minimum fees that are mentioned here, because you are doing harm not only to the whole industry, but mostly to yourself as a professional. And it's really something to remember, I think. So in this book you will also find hourly rate per work in each of the illustration field. You will find per illustration fees, once again in brackets. Those are very broad, but here you can find examples with more indications of what you should charge. A lot of information about book illustration and so on. So it's a very good resource of for illustrators and how we should price our work. Once again, if you are looking for some more information about pricing, I have a video about that, and it's linked below. The next book I wanted to share with you is Find Your Artistic Voice by Lisa Congdon. She's one of my favorite illustrators, and this is a very nice book to have and read. It's very inspirational. It's filled with illustrations and advice from the artist, And she also includes really great interviews with other artists and professionals in the industry. It's really full of inspiration, and I think it can really adapt to your career and help you with finding your own voice and your own style. So she talks, for example, about downside of trends, illustration trends, many interesting interviews, and a very good reminder to keep on practicing. So another book that I really recommend to all of you. It doesn't matter on which stage of your illustration career you are. Another book I wanted to show you, and the smallest one in my collection, is this small handbook by Andy Pizza. He's the author of very popular Creative Pep Talk podcast, and he also made a series of podcast episodes about the creative career path, when he really nicely explains how each path for us artists looks like. And this is more like an exercise book, but also with some really good advice. So you've got exercises to feel and to make inside this book. It's really nicely made. For me personally, I find it that the first half of the handbook will be great for starting illustrators, and the second half of the book is really a really good reminder for illustrators and artists that have more experience in the field, and it's really good to be reminded of those things from time to time. So I can really recommend you this small handbook and the whole podcast by Andy Pizza. Okay guys, so that was the last one for me today. Let me know if you have any other interesting books for illustrators to read. I would love to check them out. I also share a lot of interesting resources on my Patreon. Let me know if you like the video, let me know if you like the books, if you know them, and I see you in the next one. Bye!